name is Gupta.
And I'm Chandra, Guntur.
And this talk is a result of a lot of aha moments.
Yes, that is true.
And it all started when once upon a time, Chandra was feeling hungry.
You make it sound like I don't eat every day. That's not the case. I do eat every day. Well, it all started when I was cooking this delicious Indian dish called paneer tikka masala. And I found that it had a lot of similarities to what I was using in Completable Future as API to describe the recipe. And that gave me a wonderful aha moment in itself. And that's when it clicked. Let's create something out of this.
So the way a kata works in martial arts, it builds up your muscle memory by repeated actions. In a similar way, a code kata lets you level up on a topic, usage of an API, library or framework by fixing broken code. So you repeat the same steps multiple times, and that's how you build up your muscle memory and level up on that topic.
I need to quickly interrupt and ask the audience a few questions. Raise your hands if you know any of the phrases that I'm about to utter. Martial arts school, dojo, karate kid, wax on, wax off.
That I definitely know of.
Nice. So these are some of the terms associated with what we are going to talk about today. Although this particular code kata we're talking about is associated with completable future. A completable future, by the way, is something that has stages and can complete at a deferred interval, asynchronously or synchronously. So you can have stages of activities that go on together and then they merge into another activity, or they can split up. You can have exceptional cases, you can have success cases, and then you can determine which one of the completable futures you want to use. So it's almost like a great model for merging together asynchronous and synchronous processes within one single unit. You can create code katas not just for completable futures, but for anything, any API or library that you use. So the users of your API or library understand how to use your API or know the best practices of using your API. Mala?
And in the process, we will be showcasing a couple of features of IntelliJ IDEA because
IntelliJ IDEA?
Don't look at me like that, because I did not force Chandra to include IDE in the session title.
That was me. That was completely on me.
Right, and IDE really helped us create the code katas, and it has a lot of features which helps users to take up code kata.
All right. So we basically have 4 different sections of this session today. We'll cover 4 different parts, and then we'll try to put it all together.
So we'll start with preparing the amazing dish, which is paneer tikka masala.
Then we'll sort of equate it into how it merges to a code kata, what are the similarities, how are we actually sort of connecting the dots, if I may.
And as I said, we'll cover a few IntelliJ IDEA features,
and then we'll cover how this benefits you as either an API or library author or someone who wants to learn. So we will cover it from both angles.
So let's start with the preparation of paneer tikka masala. So as
Are we cooking this here?
We really wanted to live cook this on stage, but logistics prevented us from doing that. But we didn't want you all to miss out on the experience of observing, as I said, drawing parallels to the real recipe, and then thinking about the asynchronous API, and then in the process working on how to create the code kata. So let's see if we could recreate that magic using a couple of images and a video.
Okay.
So as with any recipe, we'll start with checking the ingredients.
Once you check the ingredients, paneer tikka masala is actually 2 recipes in one. The paneer is a cottage cheese, an Indian cottage cheese, and it needs to be marinated in a special spice that we prepare. And then you got your masala puree, which is the base ingredient in which the paneer tikka is actually cooked in. So these 2 parts will be combined, and this is like 2 separate completable futures that are going to merge into.
As the final step, the results of both these steps form the final dish. So let's start with checking the ingredients. Chandra, are you ready?
I am ready.
Okay, so here's my list. So the first item that we need to check is, do you have the paneer?
Paneer, cottage cheese, yes, we have some.
Okay, so where's your bag? Where are you looking? Okay, that's okay. So do you have the yogurt?
I believe we have yogurt too.
Okay, so do we have the ginger?
Yes, we have enough ginger for both parts of the recipe, so I'm just going to say yes now.
Good. So do we have the garlic?
Yes, for both parts of the recipe, again, garlic is very important.
So this is the cilantro powder. That's another ingredient you might
Yes.
not know, but of course, we just skip to the rest. And do we have garam masala?
Oh, I think we ran out of garam masala.
So garam masala is a magical Indian masala, which is a mix of 9 to 13 masalas. So we can't do without this part. So let's see what we do about it. Now the next item is, do we have the paprika powder?
Oh, I don't believe we have any paprika.
Oh my God, Chandra, that's not good.
Sorry.
Now, okay, let's go to the next part. What about the chili powder?
Yes, I definitely have red chili powder.
Great. Do we have salt?
I have enough salt for both parts of the recipes.
Great. Now let's talk about the ingredients for the second part of the recipe, which is the masala puree. So here we already checked a couple of ingredients in the previous part, so all these are ticked. So do we have a large onion?
Yes, we do.
Okay.
I believe we have most of the ingredients listed out here.
Right, so just let's go to the end of the list. We have all the ingredients for the second part of the recipe. Now let's take a look at what we have and what we don't.
Here's the inventory. So we're missing just 2 ingredients. I think we can go ahead.
No, that's not okay, because missing paprika powder is an exception. But can we handle it?
I think it's a safe exception to handle.
Yes, because I think we only need paprika powder for the color, and we can do with the chili powder.
That's
but
correct.
what about the garam masala? We can't skip that part.
So it is a bigger exception, and it needs a different kind of handling process.
So Chandra, you have to run to the store to get the garam masala. Now you can see Chandra running. Stop! Didn't you mention that you have to start the dishwasher?
I do believe so. And as I'm turning on the dishwasher, it's an asynchronous process that is going to execute cleaning my dishes while I go to the store and come back. So I'm able to perform 2 different activities, have clean dishes, and get garam masala at the same time. A completable future that's synchronous and a completable future that's asynchronous. All right, I'm at the store.
We're running out of time, so you have to run.
All right,
So what store are you at?
I'm at a store called Patel Brothers.
Oh my God, do we see someone here who's familiar?
Ooh, there's another Patel in the house.
Patel. Okay. So,
All right, I'm at the masala aisle.
okay. Look on your left, not on your right.
Oh, the other left. Okay, I found the garam masala.
Okay, so now you have the last ingredient. Good.
Great.
So now we have all the ingredients to cook the recipe. Now let's make the paneer tikka masala. So
We're ready for it.
And during the session, why we are really covering the recipe, as I mentioned, that we want you to understand the process, that we kind of had our aha moments, and then we were thinking about an API, and we would be during the session drawing parallels between these 2 things. And that would be useful to know when we talk about how to create the code kata towards the end of the session. Now let's talk about making the paneer tikka masala.
Let's do it.
Now, so the process starts with chopping of the paneer. Chandra, you're doing a good job.
Thank you.
That's good.
I tried.
Now we chop the ginger and we chop the garlic with clicker in our hand to record it. That's amazing. And then, wow, Chandra, let me ask you a quick question. Can we draw any parallels here? We talk about mixing the ingredients here, and we talked about chopping some ingredients. So what are we drawing parallels here about?
That's a great question. So there were 3 separate asynchronous activities that happened, which is chopping the cubes of paneer, chopping the garlic and the ginger, but all 3 had to complete for me to actually come to a stage where I can mix them. So this is a staged, completable future.
Interesting. So let's move forward with the rest of the recipe. Now we are mixing the ingredients in the chopped cubes, adding more masalas to it, and we give it a toss by adding yogurt, and we have to marinate for a bit. Let me stop again. What parallels are we drawing here?
So this is where I have to refrigerate what I just mixed together, and this is a timed completable future. And there's a time limit to it. We don't want to exceed beyond 45 minutes or so, because that would harden up the whole thing. So there is a conditional completable future associated with this.
That's great. Now let's come to the second part of the recipe.
This is the masala puree?
Yes. I think we still have some chopping left. May I help?
That would be great, Mala. In fact, that draws a great analogy where I have parallel worker threads doing simultaneous activities, speeding up the process.
Right, so here I am chopping the tomatoes with my hand. Chop, chop, chop.
So
chop,
am I.
Chop, 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 chop. So see, we see the magic here. We chop, see, all the tomatoes are done.
It went so quickly.
And we chop the onions, and there's some cooking involved. We're heating the butter and the ghee and heating them in a frying pan, adding some more masalas, cumin seeds, cinnamon sticks, some frying happening, and then we add the onions and
Garlic,
ginger paste, more cooking, and we have the tomatoes. Just bear with us, just a few more steps. We add the magical curry powder, and we have the brown sugar and salt, and we're almost done.
almost done with masala puree.
Yes. Now, we have two parts of the recipe ready here. How does it relate to the completable future API?
Great question. So you have two completable futures. One was to make your paneer tikka, and the other was to make your masala puree. Both parts had to be completed, and only when both parts are completed could you come to this stage, which is all of the parts have to be completed, which is a completable future API called all of, which is what we're going to show here.
Makes sense. So let's move forward and do the rest of the cooking. So we're talking about chopping the cilantro leaves, and we are next talking about marinating paneer. I want to pause again. You mentioned grill or roast. How does that relate to the API that we are going to create a kata on?
Great question. So when you make paneer tikka masala, and I'm going to segue away from code for a minute because I'm a food passionist, and when you make paneer tikka masala, there are two ways in which you can get your tikkas ready and roasted. You can either grill them or roast them, i.e. there are two possibilities, and if you're doing it for the first time, based upon your taste, you should do both simultaneously, and whichever one comes out first, eat it. So this is where you have conditional options. You have any of the completable futures completing, and you're ready with the next step. There's an any of API.
Interesting. So let's move forward and we start with the remaining recipe. Is this done?
That's a great question, because the completable future equivalent of that is an is done method, which returns a true or a false.
Okay, moving forward. Now we are combining the results of both the parts of the recipe that we just talked about, adding a few more masalas, cream, and we are done. So this is a good takeaway even if you don't follow the rest of the session. So now let's talk about
why don't we convert this into something we can show in code?
absolutely.
How about we show some thought process in some other format?
So this is
I got this.
okay.
All right, Mala, you want to walk us through this?
Absolutely, once I see that. Okay. So the recipe that we talked about, and I mentioned that we are going to draw parallels. So this is, we're kind of trying to give you an overview of what we talked about till now. So we had 4 sections. In the first section, we talk about check ingredients. No, that's the wrong note. Yeah. Probably you want to collapse this one.
Yep, will do.
Right. In this part, check ingredients, we had 3 parts. We talked about the missing paprika powder, but that was an exception that we handled well. Then we talked about garam masala, an exception again, but we could not move forward and we had to take care of that exception. And the third part is lemon juice, which depends on the preference of a person. We might use it, we might not use it. Now coming
And
on,
that is a Boolean completable future.
right. And now coming on to the second part, where we make paneer tikka masala, we talked about dependence of certain stages on other one. So there were some stages which needed to be completed before we move on to the other stages. Now if we talk about the third part, which is making the masala puree, again we are talking about dependence and
Parallel worker threads.
yes, because at one time I offered Chandra if I could help, and both of us, we were doing things in parallel. And coming on to the last part, which is paneer tikka masala, again we talk about completion of the two parts of the recipe, making the tikka and making the masala puri. That had to be completed before we could actually combine the results of both of them. So this is great. I think we've done enough talking. What about creating some code kata?
Okay, let's do that. All right, so let's move on to our favorite IDE. Can anyone guess what it is?
How many here use the Teleto idea? Oh, wow, that is amazing.
All right, Mala. So here is a small sample of how we create a code kata. What we're going to do is we're first going to create a fully working solution of what we want to achieve. In this case, I took one of the recipe parts, which is check the ingredients, and I created I guess a Java file that has all the check ingredient methods. So first you check some ingredients, and if you look at the structure view, you have check ingredients. Then I check for the existence of paprika or chili powder, which we found that we have chili powder, we don't have paprika. Look for, garam masala, decided that we needed to go to the store. I was reminded to turn on the dishwasher, turn that on. All that is covered in the examples over here. And what we then do is go ahead and log these methods as, log these values as, hey, we found these ingredients and we did not find paprika, we found chili, we log everything, we didn't find garam masala, went to the store, come back and we say successfully found garam masala.
Chandra, I want to interrupt you here.
Sure.
And a quick question. Do you mean that the process that we were following for creating the dish, you actually coded that into the kata?
That is exactly right. And if you notice, let us go through some of these examples here. You will notice, I'm going to skip to a smaller example first, although it comes later, is successful find chili powder. It is a completable future that returns a completed future, which means it's already successful. Likewise, we can have a failure completable future, which is a failed future, which throws an exception. As you correctly pointed out, it's an exception and we handled it. Right. We were like, it is okay because it says it was optional anyways.
Right, so we mean that the process that we were talking about initially and the parallels that we drew, and now we're talking about the API that we want anyone to level up on, we are really working that in a sequence. We are dumping the process, but everything is working, it seems, in this
How do we find this out? Let us go run the code and see what the values look like and if they match our inventory. All right.
One quick question. I think we are starting with code that's working.
That is a fully solved problem, yes.
Yes, that's right.
And unfortunately, the screen is a bit more darker than I expected, but you can see that we found the ingredients and it says check ingredients. I'm going to highlight it so you can see it better. Check ingredients, and all these ingredients check out, and we found that we don't have paprika and it's okay. And then we found out we don't have garam masala. I was reminded to go run the dishwasher for 30 minutes, and then while I did that, I went to the store, got the garam masala and came back.
That's good. So how do we create a kata out of this fully functional code?
Okay, so a code kata is an exercise, as we have been iterating from the beginning of the session. When you create a code kata, you're expecting the kata taker to understand some API or library or develop a best practice. In this case, we are asking them to understand an API, the completable future API. So our focus is on removing sections of code from this program which deal with completable futures. The way we do it is, in real life, we're going to delete, but here I'm going to comment out code so you can compare the differences between what we have and what we will have. So let's take these examples. But before I go ahead and embarrass myself and start typing code, I'm going to share this fact that I'm going to use a cheat. Do you want to talk about the cheat while I use the cheat?
Yes, sure. So as soon as you start using that cheat, I'll start talking about it.
Okay. So here is check for chili powder. It's a completable future that looks for successful chili powder because we found it. And the isDone method determines that the successful completable future completed. And in that case, we get a half teaspoon of chili powder. So that was our end goal, and we achieved that. And we get the chili powder from the completable future by using a get method. So the get method should return something like red chili powder as a string. And that's what we will print out. Red chili powder, half a teaspoon. Great. So what I will do here is I'm going to go ahead and comment out this entire block of code because I don't want the kata taker to do this. And in real life, I'll be deleting this code. I'm just sharing it as a comment because I want you to understand how this works. And then we go ahead and I use my cheat.
So at this point, Chandra is using live templates. How many of you are familiar with using live templates in IntelliJ IDEA? Okay, these are acronyms or shorter versions of the text that you want to insert. One quick example is system.out.println. So there are multiple inbuilt live templates which are available in IntelliJ IDEA. So you say SOUT, and if you press tab, you could get the full line of code. And that could be used to generate blocks of code. Doesn't have to restrict yourself from a single line. It could be multiple lines, as long as or short as you may want. So here we can see that we already have a lot of live templates in IntelliJ IDEA. That's really helpful to speed up how you write your code. It could be for code demos like this, but they are mostly useful when you write your everyday code. The test structure that you might be creating in anything, that really depends on the framework that you are working with, your configuration file, placeholders for them. So you just think about anything. Whenever you think about repeating certain lines of code, create a live template for that. And you could export them and have your teammates use it.
That's a great point. In fact, we've exported the Paneer Tikka Masala live templates for you to understand how it works. It's available on our GitHub location. The GitHub location is shared on the last slide, I promise you. So please do wait, we will share that. And the presentation deck is also made available for later consumption. Great, so here is the big difference of what we have and what we did. We had check for chili powder is done, that is now replaced with a false, and there is now a to-do in the hint. Isn't it interesting that they are different colors for the to-do and the hint?
This really is, because when I see myself as a taker of this code kata, and I'm intrigued as of now, why are these color coded? But that also gives me the hint that yes, they are different, and that needs to be kind of acted on in a different way.
There you go, and this is very easy to set up as well in your IDE. So this can also be exported as a part of your settings, but if you were to go to your settings, either on Windows or Mac, I use a Mac, you could go to what is called the to-do section, and you will notice that you can create your own to-dos. And once you create your to-dos, you can also go ahead and edit and change the colors that you want. So when you have a fix me or a to-do of yours that you want to grab attention for, you could set it up as a special, moniker. I could just now create a new moniker, say Chandra, and give it a light green color, and it'll be visible as light green in my code, wherever I use Chandra, : and do something with it. Awesome. So now that we've shared these interesting tidbits about IntelliJ, let's go back and take a look at what we're doing in this kata. We created a to-do to replace what was non-existent comments. We replaced the isDone method with a false and provided a hint saying replace the false with a check for chili powder something something. We use some wildcards here so that you can sort of try to guess by looking at the API. And a lot of times when you're new to an API, we recommend you go through and look at the API documentation. IntelliJ is awesome. It provides me an easy way to do that. I could simply control click or command B in the case of a Mac. I think this is similar in Windows.
It's different.
Okay. Has to be different. So IntelliJ provides for what is called the reader mode. And you can look at the API and read through very well formatted text. So this is very helpful, especially when you're learning a new API, especially if you are aided by a code kata alongside it. So if you're an API library author, it's in your best interest to write great documentation. IntelliJ will take care of rendering it for you.
If you go back to the code kata, I just want to highlight one line and ask you about it. You have a comment, this one, which says replace false with check for chili powder, and you have some wildcards, it's like question mark. So that's kind of prompting me that I could use the method isDone, but that's really cool, because when I first started using this API, I was unsure about the method names that I would be using. And I think this line itself, the comment itself, lowers the barrier for me to try and use code kata. So does it mean that depending on the audience that I'm targeting, I could create different levels of complexity for the takers?
That's a very astute observation. Indeed, you can. Depending upon your target audience, if they're experienced developers, maybe you don't want to go down to this level of depth. And maybe if they're just new beginners, you may want to give them a little more rope. And so the kata can be sort of set to beginner, intermediate, or advanced. So it's possible to target for your audience. That's a great point.
So would you like to create another kata? Or?
Sure, let's go attempt another kata. So here we have successful chili powder. We're returning a completed future, but we want, this is a low entry point version again. We'll also show you a high entry point if time permits. So here we want the kata taker to understand that when you return a completable future of type string, which is what we're trying to return, it needs to return an actual string. We have a red chili powder as our success message, and the way we do this in code kata is we are going to replace this line. I'm again going to use my cheats, so please bear with me. So there you go. What we did was we added a comment so the folk understand that there is something going on here. We created a to-do which allows the kata taker to know that there's an action they have to perform and some hints for them to understand what API they got to use. And then what we did in the code is replace the success message with a value null. And our instructions are replace the null with a success message. We're trying to keep a low entry point. You could also make it much more complex than this, where you completely remove everything and return a null and say replace the null with an actionable, completable future. So the degree of variance is based upon the kind of audience you're targeting. You could create code katas of any level of complexity.
Right, so are we creating any more katas?
I think we will take some break from creating. I think the audience got an idea and we want to leave room for questions later. Okay. So if there are questions, we'll handle more katas.
Okay, so let's talk about attempting a code kata.
Great. So I'm going to hand it over to you.
Okay, so let me go. But how do I know where do I start? This is also confusing. If I download this code from GitHub, how do I know where to start?
That's a great question. So anytime you create a code kata or any project for that matter, the first thing anyone lands on is on a README page. That is your impact statement. So make sure you have a great README page. If you go to the project root and navigate there, you will find a great README documentation. Any project should have the same setup. That's the expectation, bare minimum expectation these days.
Navigation is not good.
Is Zoom broken?
I think so.
Okay, let me just change. Pardon me, pardon this. This was unexpected.
It's really hard to work on another kind of system right before the demonstration.
That is true. Okay, so let me just change the zoom to 100% for now.
1000. Wow.
1000% would be nice.
No, you clicked on cancel.
That's
okay.
I clicked on cancel. Zoom to 100%. Okay, great. Sorry about the technical difficulty in between.
So it's live coding. What can possibly go wrong, right?
Yes.
So I'm in the README doc, and this looks good to me. I can navigate what a code kata is.
A quick walkthrough of this is basically you have a code kata. What is a code kata? Explain that to your kata takers so they have a basic understanding of it. What are the steps in which you can take this kata? How do you set it up in your IDE? What do you do? And then, if you don't mind stopping here, we have an order of solving, which probably tells you how you begin to tackle this code kata. So there are instructions on how you set it up, how you run your test. There's some solutions we provide that you can also refer to in case you stumble upon somewhere, and then the order of solving this code kata.
So I see that there are 5 points. Let me click on the first one and see where I land. Okay, so I also see a to-do window here.
That is correct.
That sounds good to me. And let me navigate. So there are multiple to-dos that I can navigate to.
That is correct. And you can filter your to-dos in your to-do tool window in case you didn't know this. In IntelliJ, you can set up filters where you say, I only want to see to-dos that match this particular moniker that we created earlier. So I can bypass the hints. I can only say to-dos. I can just say, hey, show me only labels where Chandra is showing up. So you can customize it to any level, which is awesome and cool. You can focus on exact areas that you need to focus on. So it's almost like attention, this particular moniker.
So let me attempt this kata. This is the method successful fine chili powder. It returns a string wrapped in a future instance. And I see a success message which is being assigned a value here, and the to-do and the hint tells me that I have to return the completed future method with a success message. I see that the success message here is null, and let's see if I could. Is that simple? Am I done with this
It could be
kata?
that simple, or it could be made more complex.
But how do I know that I did everything right?
That's a great question. There are a couple of ways in which you could do this based upon what kind of code kata you're creating. Either you could have a main method in your code base that you run and see if the execution returns exactly what was expected, or you can be generous with your kata taker and provide a solution equivalent of what you have in the kata. In our case, we have a solution module in which there should be a solution for part 1 check ingredients.
So are we looking at this one?
The solution, yes please.
Okay. Wow. So I think I did it right.
Right,
So
and if you notice in the solution, the to do is no longer marked. There is a space between the to and do, so it doesn't show up as a to do anymore.
Right. So that was great. So we talked about creating a code kata, and we talked
And
about
taking one. You
taking.
look like you're an expert at taking katas now.
Oh, I am definitely. So what are we doing next? We go to our presentation.
Yes, please.
Okay.
Okay.
So we're done with the code demo. Okay, so we talked about just one of the ways in which we could create the katas. So Chandra, you want to talk about, are there any other ways that we could create a code kata?
Right. There are at least 3 very commonly used patterns in code katas. There may be more. I'm not claiming that this is an exhaustive list, but you can have what is called broken code katas, where we just created one where you break sections of code and then the kata taker is given to-dos and hints to go fix that code. So that's one method where you're encouraging them to go look up an API, you provide hints, they learn, they read the documentation or they read your comments, and then they go figure out how to solve that problem. That's a broken code kata. Another way of doing this is when you have broken JUnit tests. So your code is completely functional, you have JUnit tests that fail, and your job is to run those JUnit tests. You, as in the kata taker's job, is to run those JUnit tests and make sure that the flags turn green. And this also benefits because you get multiple different ways of solving the problem. So when you want your audience to be able to solve things in their own way, build their confidence, and you're not just focused on teaching them the core API, a broken JUnit test model works very well. It also helps when you want to do some performance analysis because you could do different kinds of, method calls or whatever, see the performance results of those by running the JUnit test cases. The third model, which is fairly infrequent, is where you have a sample application, and the sample application provides you all the method calls or API usage that you want, and then you're asked to create something parallel to it, relying on what you learned in the sample application. This is a bit more complex, but we have examples of each of those available.
That sounds interesting because everyone would have a different way of learning, and when we talk about the creator of a code kata, they would have different levels of comfort with the different ways we could create or take kata depending on the team members or how they really want to do it.
That's right, and it also depends upon what you want communicated through your code kata. There are code katas created to teach, there are code katas created to share best practices, and if you have an internal corporate library and you want it reused within your organization, a code kata is an excellent way of you promoting that. So what are the benefits of using a code kata?
To me, it's the experiential learning because when I want to learn a new API or framework, I just don't want to read about it. I just don't want to watch a video on it. I want to actually practice doing it. I want to use the methods. I want to look at the code. So for me, it's the experiential learning.
That's great. So I think another benefit that I see is that there are different ways of learning, right? There are some folk who learn by reading, let's say books. There are some folks who learn by, listening to audio or watching video, YouTube, etc. And then the third way, which is the most comprehensive way in my humble opinion, is code katas, because not only do you get to do things, you put your hands to the keyboard and do things, you can also have links to books or to videos or to audio material available on the internet. So it combines the best of all 3 worlds and gives you a great way to teach some concept to somebody.
Absolutely, and it's great for library developers, framework developers who want to share best practices with the users of their libraries, frameworks, so that they can encourage people to use them in a certain way. And of course, for the takers of the code kata, they help you level up on any particular topic.
That is great.
And the example that we used was about cooking recipes, but of course we know that we get inspiration from a lot of tasks that we do every day that we see or do. So feel free to find the inspiration that you see in your life and then draw parallels and then talk about how you can relate that to a coding concept and create a code kata on it.
Yeah, so the one takeaway I would say, if you are interested in code katas, is try to make it relatable to some activity that you perform or you expect your kata takers to perform. And then once they relate to that activity, it's muscle memory building, they know what they're doing, and all you're doing is codifying their process and making them solve what is not available to them.
Thank you so much. I think we're ready to take questions now. Anything about the ingredients of the masala, paneer tikka masala? How to find garam masala? What is coriander seeds? No. What's code kata? Yes.
Does Chandra rent out as a personal chef?
Does Chandra rent out as a personal chef? Sure. I'll have to talk to my manager about it. Was there any other question? Yes, please. I'm sorry, I can't hear you. Could you? Paneer. Paneer is cottage cheese.
So the next time we'll definitely try.
Yeah, we'll probably do it live here, and then we'll put up a stove. We'll bribe some people, get the stove in here, and just cook.
So that everyone can taste it and know how it is. Thank you everyone for attending the talk today. It was a pleasure to present.
Thank you.